Sell everything off because you're never spending time painting again.
And I started to get equally parts excited and terrified.
Forget your hobby. You're not going to have money for your hobby leading up to it. Do you know how much prams are?
It feels like everything's about to change. My children are now 7 and 5. It's been a while since they were babies. To make sure I had the facts right, I'm joined by 3 other creators. Sam from Basic Brush, whose son Oliver is now 5 months old.
I'm Sam from the Basic Brush.
Nick from CC Minis, who has 2-year-old Oren.
There you go, James. Does that look better?
And Benji from Benji's Hobbies, whose son Ethan is 3 days old at the time of recording.
I'm Benji from Benji's Hobbies.
Fatherhood. It's a journey. And before you start, there are so many questions.
Am I going to be a good dad? Am I going to trip, fall, and hurt the kid somehow? Is he even going to like me? How on earth am I going to afford a kid? That might be a uniquely US problem, though.
I'm making this video because when I had my kids, for a while at least, it sort of felt like I'd never get my life back. I'd have to give up everything I loved, my hobby included. And obviously it didn't turn out like that. So I wanted to lay out my journey in the hope that it helps some folks out. Like a lot of my well-being videos, I use the hobby as a framework to hang a more serious topic off. As always though, if you're really struggling with something in this video, talk to someone. It helps. So let's rewind. This was 26-year-old me, 10 years ago. This is my beautiful wife Fiona, and this is our little dog Milo, our companion for the journey. We were just married, just moved into our first little house. It was small, it was cold, but we loved it. It was ours. And we were ready for the next chapter. Life was good. We were happy. But life was about to change. Big time.
At first it was a little shocking, like we were trying, but it happened really, really quickly.
For Fiona and I, we planned to have kids. And things happened easily. A little bit too easily for my liking. I had banked on months of fantastic sex before we finally conceived. Sadly, it didn't pan out like that. I sort of assumed it always went like this. It doesn't. In fact, amongst our friends at least. Fiona and I are the minority, so if it doesn't work for you first time, don't panic. But if you're worried, go and see a doctor.
But yeah, I mean, we were really excited. You know, we had some troubles at the beginning, so for us it was really, really good news.
It didn't really hit me though until my wife started to show, which is of course, 4 or 5 months into the process. Then things started to feel a lot more real. And I started to get equally parts excited and terrified.
I was absolutely ecstatic. It was something that we were obviously planning and intending on doing. So yeah, when I got the news that we were actually expecting, it was great. I was over the moon about it.
Despite my minor disappointment about the lack of months of wild sex, Fiona and I were incredibly excited about having a baby. And as soon as we were able to, we told everybody about it. We would sit down in the evenings planning our new lives together, talking endlessly about names of babies and what we were going to do with them. Other than that though, initially at least, not a lot changed.
As things went on, did that change, or did you just remain excited and then you went into all the buying all the stuff and, because I know you've just moved house as well.
Yeah,
so that's another big thing.
kind of definitely added a slightly interesting dynamic to it. So yeah, definitely been a sort of a bit chaotic really, but yeah, it's been good. It's been good.
At a couple of months, Fee started to get morning sickness, which changed our routines slightly. Fee literally couldn't be in the same room as me when I was cooking, particularly if I was cooking macaroni cheese. Poor Fiona lived off dry crackers and soft cheese. This was the first time, but definitely not the last time, I was very grateful to be born a bloke. But this also began something new. It began to feel real.
So go on then, D-Day, how did that process go for you? I mean, for me it was, it all happened really, really slowly at the beginning, then it all seemed to happen at once, then like, oh god, it's all here.
That's exactly how it was. When it started happening, it all happened at once, basically. It's crazy going through that though, like it's just so... I take it you were in the room at the time and everything as well.
To be honest with you, I was really worried I was going to pass out. That was my major concern.
I think I probably would have passed out if that had been the case, but I stayed up at the head end. I didn't venture. I didn't venture down there.
I actually keeled over. My wife couldn't take any of the sort of the paracetamol, couldn't keep anything down, so she was having an absolutely awful time. We were already a week late, and I had. In the end, because of the way it sort of worked, I had 3 days sort of going through that, then 3 days in the hospital, then 3 days at home, and then I was back at work. So for those first 3 days, we didn't really sleep at all. So actually, when we got to the hospital and everything started going, and they finally got painkillers, etc., I actually keeled over, and they were like, "Oh, are you scared of blood?" And I was like, "No, I'm just so tired." So I ended up waking up and with an oxygen mask and my face in the air. They're like, "We've got a fainter," and I'm like, "I'm not."
It's such an indescribable feeling being in the room when that happens, and just the power. Like, you know, sometimes I've taken Lucy for runs at times, and she has to stop. She's, "Oh, I can't do this, and you know that might be after sort of a kilometre or so, but just."
Is Lucy in the room with you at the moment?
No, she's not. I'm just making sure she's not listening in to what I'm saying about her. But it's the you know, it was just the sheer power and the absolute sort of determination and things. It's absolutely indescribable. It's just
I completely agree.
I am genuinely like lost for words. I don't know how to describe it. It's just it's visceral. It's just so, you know, that all that emotion and energy going into pushing a child out. You know, it's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? It's like I say, people talk about that experience as being like this, you know, wonderful, life-changing experience, and it was. But I was expecting it to be about this sort of like bond with the baby and all this sort of stuff, but it actually wasn't. It was just filled with this like profound respect for Fiona, my wife.
Yeah.
Lots of the effort and education around kids in general focuses on pregnancy and childbirth, and that's right, it's a fairly new experience for everybody, but I think they've got it wrong. Honestly, the birth is incredible. It's a deeply personal experience that's unique to everybody. But for me at least, I spent most of it just worried about Fiona. My main takeaway from the whole thing was a profound sense of respect for Fiona, who laboured for 3 days and gave birth to a 9-pound baby. Our second, if anything, was even harder for Fi. Certainly more physical. Nothing went wrong particularly, she was just exhausted at the end of it. I'm not really going to sugarcoat this. I was absolutely terrified during that. Fiona was clearly exhausted and in agony, and there was nothing I could do other than hold her hand and motivate her. Don't get me wrong, it was worse for Fiona, but I'm just saying, it was actually a very tough experience and not one that I was expecting.
The first day was wild. Holding my kid for the first time was pretty surreal. All my fears started to wash away, except for the thoughts of medical bills. Hospitals just feel expensive here. Our first trip home was really interesting as well. My wife and I walked through the door, put our kid on the bed, and then just thought, now what? Honestly, we were so tired at that point though that we couldn't really think of anything else. So we all slept a lot that day.
How's the sleep and stuff going? Is that going okay?
It's just been such a blur. Like, you know, I'm 3 days in now, and I'm having difficulty in judging when one day ended and the next day started.
So this is us. Our new family is back home, a unit. The first few weeks sailed past. We struggled with lack of sleep, breastfeeding, nappies, all the usual stuff you expect. But I had some time to myself for hobby time, because actually I found that newborn babies eat and then they sleep a lot. So in between those little bits and pieces, I was able to get some time to myself. But at some point that began to change, and reality began to dawn a little bit. A baby is for life, not just for Christmas, is a saying no one has ever said before. So this is the bit of the journey that no one told me. All the books, all the advice focuses on the first bit, and through all of this somehow I managed to avoid thinking about what happens next. Crazy, right? We knew some of it, obviously, but genuinely had no idea what we were letting ourselves in for. Sam puts it best.
Parents don't tell prospective parents the truth, because I know that when he finally arrived, it was a million times harder. But as soon as they start smiling at you and laughing at you about I want to say it was the 6-week mark. I could be completely wrong with that. But that's when it just instantly becomes so much easier.
Our reality was that once the visitors had slowed down and then stopped altogether, we were left on our own to care for this small human, while the rest of the world just moved on and carried on without us. At least that's how it felt to me.
So the first few months were really challenging for my wife and I. We were both still working full time, but remotely, which is another one of those weird, uniquely pandemic situations. My wife was a teacher, so when she was teaching class remotely, I'd be taking care of the little one. Then I was managing a bunch of projects, So I would hand the baby off to her when she was done teaching. I would be able to work for an hour or so, and then switch off. And then it kind of went back and forth like that for the first 4 or 5 months. After a few months of that, I ended up resigning my position to take care of the little one full time, which was a time that I'm very, very grateful for, even with all the weird pandemic things going on.
Fee began her new life of babies and meetups with other mums. I went back to work. The sleep patterns became more and more broken, and both of us became steadily more and more exhausted. No sooner have you worked out one routine for the baby than they suddenly change their mind and you have to come up with an entirely new plan. They always keep you on your toes.
The hardest thing on the hobby, or at least that I found, was that continuously changing routine, because you might dictate that, at 6 o'clock you give them a bath, so by 6:30 they're in their cot and they tend to sleep through to 10. But at one point, he would wake up, he would sleep through till 4, and then we hit sleep regression, and then he started waking up at 2. One of the hardest things I found is the, having your sleep broken up. It's not the amount of sleep that matters, it's the continuous sleep. I had in the end, because of the way it sort of worked, I had 3 days, then 3 days in the hospital, then 3 days at home, and then I was back at work. So for those first 3 days, we didn't really sleep at all, which, to be fair, actually got me in good stead. If you want to, practice parenthood, I'd thoroughly recommend staying awake for 72 hours, and then, after that, it seems like you get a lot of sleep.
That's just horrible advice. Don't do that. Needless to say, for me, at this point, any idea of hobby time was completely out the window. I just parked it all completely. And most evenings, I just collapse in front of the telly, which is not a good plan. Honestly, if I can give you one piece of advice, it would be to make some time for yourself. Just 20 minutes where you're not doing something baby related, just to keep a bit of sanity. If you plow on and try and tough it out, pretending like nothing's ever happening and that you're absolutely fine when you're not, you will break. And your hobby is a great tool to avoid that happening.
It's very difficult at the beginning. It's difficult seeing what they did to your partner. It's difficult seeing what they did to your life, because I don't think anyone truly realizes how destructive babies are. Because I don't know about you, but when you would get home or if it had just been a long day and your partner was stressed, I felt like you couldn't go, it wouldn't be fair, even if, they've got the baby. It's not, you can't wander away and do something else because it just feels completely unfair.
Sadly, I didn't have future me to give myself decent advice, so I ploughed on regardless. Bleakly, I found myself dreading spending time with my baby. I should point out that I did really want to spend time with Evelyn. In fact, I took a day off a week so I could do exactly that. But the reality of spending time with her was starkly different to the one that I had in my head before going into all of this. I hate saying this as it makes me sound like a complete dick, but I don't think I've ever hated any time more than those first few months.
I felt the same way. I just want to make that clear, and I think anyone watching the video and feeling that way, that's perfectly normal. Talk to people, talk to your friends who have kids, and you'll find, as with almost anything, mental health just in general, talk to people. Men, we're so bad at it. We don't talk about it, and then you suddenly talk to someone about it and you go, they feel the same way, and it just makes the world a difference.
I so wanted to be a good dad, but every time she cried, I would just become irrationally angry and have to really struggle to keep my temper in check. I'm usually quite a calm person, so this came as a bit of a shock to me.
I had the same thing. I think a lot of dads have sort of anger issues with it. You're so tired and you're so hurt that you want to love this thing, and you love it unconditionally, and it's screaming at you, and you're just like, why? When the baby's crying, you feel like there's the only thing that you can do. It wipes everything else. It's like some kind of brain overcoming technique, and you're like, you can't focus, you can't sleep, you can't do anything apart from, how can you stop that?
It got so bad that one day when she just wouldn't stop crying, I just completely broke down on my kitchen floor. I just didn't know what to do. That was a really dark moment for me, and from that moment on, my mornings with Ev would just be me walking for hours and hours, no matter the weather, just to ensure that she went to sleep and I survived the day. I'm not being dramatic, that was just my way of coping with it. So why am I telling you this? I'm not trying to scare you off, because this certainly isn't everyone's reality. But this was my reality. I felt so isolated and such a poor dad. And I was sort of too embarrassed to tell my friends about it, for fear that they would think I was a failure too.
At first it was really hard, and I didn't really hobby at all for the first 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4 months. But as he got older, his naps got more consistent and just a little bit longer. As they get even older, past those infancy months, kids' naps start to get less frequent, but much longer. I certainly don't have as much free time as I used to before having a kid, but now when I do have free time, I recognize it and I don't waste it, looking at my phone or playing video games. I try my best to sit down and start working on something, because if I do anything else, it just kind of feels like time wasted. Like, I used to really, really love playing video games, got a lot of enjoyment out of them, but now when I try to play them, it just feels empty. There's nothing to show for it anymore. So I work on video projects, crafting, painting, things like that. And I feel like I have a lot more to show for it at the end of the day. Getting that hobby time in, or as my wife likes to call it, Nick time, makes me much happier, helps me stop thinking about work, chores, other day-to-day stresses, and just become a less stressed, happier husband and father, which of course helps the family feel happier as a whole.
The most reliable night to do it is we came up with an agreement that on a Wednesday night, guilt-free, I could go and hobby, stream, do whatever. And a Thursday night, Claire could go and, have, a guilt-free night. Because like I said, what ends up happening a lot of the time is you end up both sitting, exhausted after a day, maybe because of work, more likely because you've, had the baby all day. And, at that point, both of you have really low energy and you're like, oh, I just won't do anything. Whereas if you go away and do your hobby, you recharge it.
I am in the middle of my new studio renovation. I've not even been in there.
Fair enough. I think you've had other things going on.
Yeah. Like, my wife is she understands that, the hobby is important to me. It's something that is great for my mental health. I find YouTube very rewarding as well. I'm probably much like you, the hobby and YouTube now kind of are amalgamated into one. I'm not parking it completely. It might slow down a little bit, but then again, I don't particularly make videos very quickly anyway. If I get a video out every 2 weeks, I feel like I'm doing well. But yeah, it'll probably be every kind of maybe 3 weeks, maybe even a month between videos. But I think that's okay.
I think it's really important to have that balance, right? Because if you find yourself trying to squeeze your old life into your new life, I think that's a recipe for disaster. You'll just end up putting way too much pressure on yourself, and then you won't be able to achieve anything very well. I think just realize that things are going to change and then try and push forward. I think that's a really sensible way to do it.
My biggest hobby related advice though is to use the time that you have wisely and make sure you're doing something that you want to be doing. If it isn't hobbying at any given moment, that's completely okay. It's okay to take a break. You probably need one.
So I put on a brave face for nearly a year, and it was only when I started to come out to the other side of that I began to see how badly wrong I'd really got it. It made it so much harder for everybody by not doing so. And so, if this is you, talk to someone. I like to joke now that Ev is my favourite child because we've been forged together through really tough times. I've got an amazing relationship with her now. We do loads of stuff together. So another takeaway from this is the various stages of having kids, they don't last forever. Everything's just a phase, and you will come out the other side. I slowly put my hobby time in with painting and the YouTube channel, and I use it every week as a time to process and reset, just like it should do. When B was born, I was rightfully worried that it would be the same again, but actually, it wasn't. It wasn't even close. The second time round, I felt like a bit of a veteran. I knew what I was doing, and therefore my anxiety and my stress about the whole situation was a lot less.
Have a hobby with my kids yet? No, not yet. He's still a little young for it and just kind of likes to grab everything and start bashing paintbrushes around, or, grabs a razor blade and swings it wildly. I'm kidding. I don't let him touch the razor blades, just the X-Actos is much safer. He did pick out a couple colors for my kit bash steam tanks, which was really fun, but I am really excited for when he's old enough to grasp that we're trying to build something and we're trying to paint something, and we can sit down, and really it's an attention span thing. He doesn't quite have it yet. He'll get there though. I'm really excited. We do have a whole bunch of Hot Wheels cars that he's been playing with, and I have a feeling those are going to make some excellent Gaslands vehicles.
So flash forward 7 years. Sadly, our little companion Milo's passed away. Gone but not forgotten, little buddy. I've got two amazing kids. We tell each other stories, tell each other jokes. Theirs are awful, mine are amazing. We watch movies together, but most importantly, we hobby together too. Check out this awesome little warrior penguin diorama that Evelyn made. Or this awesome little fish that Bee made for me.
Do you imagine sort of hobbying with your kids Do you imagine, or how do you see that?
I hope so. Obviously, I've got a little boy, which, well, I think will make it a little bit easier, perhaps, to get him into these sorts of things. He's already been introduced to Rings of Power, so he's watched the first 2 episodes with us. So hopefully, he will be a Lord of the Rings fan as well as he grows a bit older.
So although the journey wasn't easy, and it isn't over by a long shot, it was well worth it.
Savor the time when they're really young, like those infant years, and double savor the cuddles. Those don't last forever.
Offer you one piece of advice is spend as much time, and I don't mean like in a wishy-washy, sort of like, oh, cherish these moments, they're precious sort of thing. Basically, spend as much time doing as much as you can, getting stuck in, helping feed, doing all that. It'll pay dividends later. Like painting minis, you just got to do it a lot.
Having kids will change everything. So be ready to embrace it. You'll find the important bits stay with you, and the stuff you thought you had to leave behind wasn't that important anyway.
And don't waste your time on social media. Well, except for YouTube. Get a white noise machine. You can thank me later. All right, guys, stay healthy. Take care. Bye.
It's probably too early for me to be giving any advice. Come back to me in a month's time and I might say completely different. Sell everything off because you're never spending time painting again.
Getting to the point where they react to everything, they laugh, which I think is the only way that you survive parenthood.
And yeah, it just feels that I wouldn't say we've got it nailed, but I think we're doing all right. We're keeping him alive.
If you nailed it 3 days, I think you're overrating it a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think to say we're keeping him alive. He seems to be doing all right. He's not crying too much, so I'm taking that as a big win at the moment.
I want to say a huge thank you if you've made it this far. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a really long time. It's not an easy subject to talk about, but something I really wanted to do to try and help folk out who may be struggling or just have questions. A huge thanks also to my collaborators Benji's Hobbies, Nick from CC Minis, and Sam at the Basic Brush. Go and check out their channels, they're all linked down below. If you like this sort of video, I've got a whole playlist about well-being topics which you should check out. You'll find the link just over there. Thanks so much for watching.
I have carpal tunnel right now. That's why I have this. It looks really cool, doesn't it? I'll take this off now because I'm embarrassed. There you go, James. Does that look better?